On this edition of Independent Sources, what's next for Haiti after protesters virtually shut down the country in anger over recent election results?
Endangered languages, why is it so important to preserve them?
And the uproar over Tainos claiming their ethnic identity.
Welcome to Independent Sources. I'm Viano Ravinka.
And I'm Gary Pierre. At the beginning of the year, Haiti was rocked by a powerful earthquake that virtually tore the country in half. Then last week, there was an equally frightening bookend to the year. Angry protesters heaped earthquake rubble into makeshift barricades, burned tires, and destroyed the party headquarters of President René Préval's handpicked successor.
The protesters are angry because they claim that the country's preliminary election results are suspect. The National Electoral Council announced last Tuesday that President Préval's protégé, Jude Celestin, had edged out the more popular candidate, Michel Martelly, for a place in the January runoff.
Now, a country already in ruins after January's quake not only finds itself having to rebuild physically, now the government must rebuild trust among the people. I sat down with Kim Ives of Haiti Liberté newspaper and Rico Dupuis of Radio Soleil to talk about the unrest and emotional rebuilding amidst the flames and rubble in Haiti. The Haiti story has been fluid. Bring us up to date as to where we are now. What's going on, Rico?
Well, my understanding is that last night they had a very important meeting at the residence of the president. The president was there, the prime minister was there, and ambassadors from several important countries were there, the U.S., Canada, and Brazil, and so on. At the end of the meeting, I think they issued a communique saying that they agreed, they are demanding that all the candidates do what the CP asked for, which is to submit their disagreement.
The CP is the Provisional Electoral Council.
The Electoral Council, okay. Yes. So they have 72 hours to do that, submit their challenges to the results. Once that is done, and then you have the commission, but they want that done before they complete the work of the commission. What is the commission? It's a commission that will look at how to solve the problem. But this morning I heard that the Unity is refusing the composition.
Unity is the ruling party.
The ruling party.
President Préval.
Exactly. They refusing the composition that is being offered of the commission because they feel that, in fact, basically they're asking that two members of the commission not be accepted. It's the Economic Forum and the CNO. The CNO is the Council of Observers. They feel they are the same group because they have the same chairman, and they feel that they will necessarily rig the process against them.
Kim, I mean, Unity is making demands. I mean, given that they were in charge for these elections, how much leeway do they have to make demands on any sort of commission that's been formed?
Well, I think Unity is defending their interests of their candidate, which came in second. But really, Gary, I think it's two movements that we see here. There's one movement of the people who are against the elections altogether because the Lavalas family party, the largest in the country, was eliminated early on in the game. It, in a way, made the whole thing stillborn. The whole exercise was stillborn. So a lot of people boycotted for that. The official KEP figures are 77% didn't go vote.
Yes.
And now maybe some people weren't on the rolls, they couldn't find their, et cetera, didn't have an address, et cetera. But for sure, there was a lot of people who just boycotted the whole process. And then on the other hand, you have this sweet Mickey, Michel Martelly phenomenon, which to me is really the right wing, the old Duvaliers really making a bid for power again.
Really?
Maybe with US backing. We look at the company that's behind them, this Ostas and Sola. They were behind Calderon, who stole the Mexican election. They were behind McCain. They were behind Walesa and a number of other where the U.S. have had strategic interests in the outcome of the election. So that's a question mark for me if there might be some hidden hands behind this all.
I mean, Rico, do you agree that Sweet Mickey, as controversial as it may be, is part of the right wing in the United States, and is he behind some of the violence that we've seen in the streets of Port-au-Prince?
But one thing that's very, very clear, for the most part, it's really supporters of Sweet Mickey that are basically creating all the havoc that we've seen in the last few days. All I know is that Imler Rebu,
who the former military
member of the Leopard also, he said something on radio, and he said it on many stations, that he went outside to look at the operation of the supporters of Mickey, and he said very, very clearly what he saw, the level of sophistication, organization, has really surprised him, and he's definitely that's not really a simple Mickey operation. So that's what he said, and he said it very, very forcefully. I don't know what it meant, but that's what he said.
Well, I mean, it can't be both. Kim, how much influence does the Lavalas still have in the country? And they seem to be working hand in hand with the right wing, if you will, in the case of Sweet Mickey's movement.
Well, no, I think it's really two parallel movements. I mean, Lavalas is very strong and large, but it's decapitated. Of course, its head is in exile in South Africa still, former President Jean-Bertrand Aristide. So in many ways, it's a giant body without a head. And I think, in a way, they're capitalizing on this discontent and rejection of those masses, of this process from which they were essentially disqualified. And so this right wing, these former Makuts, are trying to take advantage of this discontent and get in their candidate as a supposed outsider, which was the whole spin that this fancy Spanish firm gave his campaign.
Okay. Rico, where do we go from now? I mean, the country's at an impasse. You know, they're just trying to avert more violence. And how can they stop?
I don't know where we're going. I know where we should go. In my view, there will be no solution to this without the participation of the so-called the G12, which is basically the 12 candidates,
okay,
that are demanding the annulment of the whole process because it's a charade. It's a
well, how realistic is that? Can they annul the elections after spending $29 million? Is that possible?
Well, the U.S. is going to say no. They spent about $15 million, half of it themselves, and you know, for them, everything's form. You know, I don't think it really matters to them whether the people's will is expressed or not, despite what the embassy says. I think that there's a lot of pressure just to give any kind of result, whatever it is, and then there are these occult forces at work which are trying to nudge in, to me, either Manigat or Martelly.
And Rico, you said earlier, you don't know where they're going, but you know where they should go. Where should they go?
They should incorporate the G12 into the decision making. They should not go to a second round solely with Sweet Mickey, Martelly, and Celestin. That is a recipe for disaster.
Well, what about Milan Manigat, who is the top vote getter?
But what I'm saying is Milan Manigat started with a deficit of credibility for having more in 24 hours. It's clear that if I'm ahead, then the process is good. And if I'm behind, then the process is not good. Mm-hmm. You see, you cannot begin your presidency like that.
I was in Port-au-Prince that day. It was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a lot of emotions running high. They organized this impromptu news conference and they called for the annulment of the process. Then 3 or 4 hours later, she was ahead, and she decided to go along with the process. That's what
because Edmond Millet, the head of minister of the UN occupation of Haiti, called her and said, "Hey, you're ahead. Don't drop out." And he did the same thing to Sweet Mickey. So he called them both, got them back at the race, kept them going. But to me, no matter who wins in the current election, the way it's run, it's a selection, not an election, because the masses of people have been excluded. And so I agree with Rico 100%. It has to be annulled, and I agree with the Haitian people 100%.
Well, as we know, the powers that be want to cancel the elections. So now, is that likely to foster more violence in Port-au-Prince and the other large cities?
It seems to me there is an opportunity there. After January 12th, it became very, very clear that Haiti is not going to come out of where it is without the participation, the active participation of all sectors of society. Mm-hmm. The possibility is there. In the G12, you have Charlie Baker You have Voltaire, you have Saillant, people with different ideological points of view. And for the first time, the country would be run from the center. Because if, for example, it's Maniga, whether you want to admit it or not, it's going to be his people. Sweet Mick is going to be his people. But this structure would force various components of society to work together.
Well, I'm not sure I understand. How could the G12, I mean, Kim Perry, you could weigh in on this. The G12, are you proposing that these 12 candidates somehow form a government?
No, the G12 plus Sweet Mick and
whoever the president is.
And Maniga.
So how does that cohabitate?
Well, it would be if there is no ideal solution for Haiti right now. I'm saying when you look at what we have there right now, between let's say what are the alternatives? Yeah. The presidency of Maniga, the presidency of Sweet Mickey, or a collegial presidency, whatever it is, but that has all these people together and they have to take decisions together.
Rico, I think the demands of the people, and that was the demands.
And I guess this is where you're coming from. You think the Lavalas should be part of this whole process as well.
Right. The Lavalas, which is the majority party by all accounts, by everybody, should be involved. And that's why, as demonstrations have said in front of the UN this week, last Friday there was one, this coming Thursday there was, on the 16th there's one during the day, and they're asking for annulment of the elections, replacement of the cap. This cap is just too corrupt, too much of a handmaiden of Preval, and then removal of that UN occupation force, because any election under an occupation is essentially violated. You're not sovereign, and you're under the obedience of a larger army.
Unfortunately, we have to end the conversation there. Kim Ives, Rico Dupuis, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Still to come on Independent Sources, what's being done in New York to save some indigenous languages?
Before that, Marlene Peralta has some other news.
Thanks, Gary. Here's a look at some headlines from the ethnic media. From the Filipino Reporter, a lawsuit against Mount Sinai Hospital by a pro-life nurse who claimed she was forced to participate in an emergency abortion was dismissed by a court of appeals. The court ruled that Catherine Sensen de Carlo, a Catholic operating room nurse from the Philippines, does not have the right to sue the hospital. A lower federal court had also dismissed Sensen's claims in January. The court found that the church amendment, which protects nurses from being discriminated against if they refuse to perform abortions for religious reasons, does not provide for a private individual cause of action. The president of the New York Federation of Taxi Drivers has outraged the Hispanic community with some of his recent comments, El Diario La Prensa reports. Fernando Mateo said in a press conference that 99% of people who steal or kill taxi drivers are either black or Hispanic, and advised drivers not to pick them up if they see any suspicious activity. The comments were made outside Jamaica Hospital, where a driver is being treated after being shot 6 times by a Latino passenger who was trying to rob him. According to the Irish Voice, the recent economic downturn is sending a new wave of Irish immigrants to New York. In fact, according to immigration advocates, there are as many as 50,000 undocumented Irish immigrants in the U.S., a fact the publication says shocked some legislators. The last influx of Irish immigrants happened in the 1980s, but according to the paper, many returned home to get a piece of the country's prosperity in the last decade. And finally, from the Italian Tribune, 2 ancient Roman statues made their way back to Italy more than 20 years after they were stolen. The Roman goddess Fortuna and the bronze statue of Zeus were found by a police officer who's a member of the National Treasure Division. The agent recognized the 2 ancient treasures at an antique shop in New York while strolling the streets with his family last year. After a long investigation, American authorities convinced the owner, who had purchased the statues from the Sotheby's auction house, to return them to Italy. Those are just a few headlines from the ethnic media. Now back to Dianora and Gary in the studio.
Thanks, Marlene. We often hear news of animals being endangered, yet don't hear much about the death of languages. One study says that one language falls out of use once every 2 weeks. Scientists attribute this to a bilingual society or indigenous tongues disappearing in mainstream school systems.
It's also apparent in immigrant communities where second generations don't use their language. It's estimated that about 800 languages are spoken in New York, ranging from the Istro-Romanian Romance dialect to Quechua, named after the Peruvian tribe who speak it.
With all these languages spoken, some scientists are jumping at the chance to take advantage of this reverse Babel that New York seems to have become. I spoke with sociolinguist Miriam Cadillo and Professor Juliette Blevins of CUNY's Endangered Language Initiative to learn more about what's being done to preserve this endangered species. Thank you both for being here. Languages have come and gone extinct since the beginning of times, but the current rate of language extinction is said to be close to 90% of all the languages that there are around the world, and that's according to the Endangered Language Alliance, for which you, Juliette, work. Is globalization the main culprit here?
Well, I think there's a very large variety of factors, but globalization is certainly one factor. Right now, the estimate is that there are approximately 6,800 languages spoken in the world, and of those, in about 100 years, maybe half will still be spoken. So what we're seeing is the major world languages, that's Mandarin, Chinese, English, Spanish, Russian, and so on, the top 10 to 15 are actually taking over the globe. And globalization plays a big role because people are bombarded with media and listening on their, devices, handheld devices to these major world languages.
Miriam, what do you find to be the main causes to this rate of extinction?
Well, I think it is, there are macro reasons and also micro, no? It depends. On one, you have what the professor has just mentioned, which is sort of things that are happening globally. But then you also have the language policies on each country and each region, who have always been pushing for homogenization of some of the languages over other languages. And the ones that are usually have been more impacted have been the languages of the poor, the languages of the indigenous people, or the tribal people of the world. And also the Creoles. Huh? I mean, there is an impact on those languages.
Are there certain parts of the world more affected than others, Miriam?
Well, that will be a matter of criteria. But what I can report to is about what is happening in South America, especially in the Andes and in the Amazon. That we have a number of languages, especially in the Amazon areas of Peru, that are basically at the birth of extinction. And revitalization efforts are urgent in those areas. And even Quechua, who is supposed to be a language that apparently has a lot of vitality, around 12 to 14 million people speak Quechua in 7 countries in South America, is an endangered language too.
And how do you go about revitalizing a language? If you could, Miriam, talk about your personal involvement in Peru.
Well, revitalizing a language depends, to me, a lot on the speakers themselves. The speakers are the ones who have to make the decision to keep on, first of all, using the language and giving it to their children. If there is an interruption in the, what we call intergenerational, that's a concept that Dr. Joshua Fishman has created. If there is an interruption, then the language will go anyway. And then the second thing is to try to look at how countries can make some decisions that are usually called from top down, which is legislation. I have worked, I am not, as a sociolinguist, I'm not a great believer in those kind of initiatives, but I had the opportunity to work in the drafting of a legislation in Peru that was approved, and that it should be important in terms of helping preserving, oral, original, and indigenous languages in Peru. But legislation is something very complicated. Sometimes it works in the opposite way. Then there are the changes that come from the same people. Bilingual teachers, I think, at least in the Andes, are probably the most important group in this moment, because they are the ones who have the children who are still speaking the mother tongue, or in indigenous language as a mother tongue, and they are the ones who reformulate the policy, the ones who try to keep the languages alive. So.
I'd like to focus our attention on New York City, where about 900 languages are spoken and about half of those are said to be endangered. Juliet, how are linguists tapping into this pool of endangered languages, and how does it help to revitalize some of them?
Well, what linguists are doing at the moment are, first of all, we're trying to get accurate survey numbers. So we have some numbers from the U.S. Census and the New York State Census. We're trying to improve on those by sending linguistics students and other interested language activists out to the streets in places like Queens and Brooklyn, where there's a lot of linguistic diversity, to publicize the fact that there are linguists here who are willing to help people if they're interested in revitalizing their language or maintaining their language. And we've had a lot of positive responses from groups, immigrant groups from all over the world, groups from the Middle East, from China, from West Africa. In Brooklyn, there are many speakers of endangered languages from the Caucasus region. As Miriam said, I mean, it is up to the speakers to decide what they want to do with their language. But what's interesting about the New York City situation is that many groups, like the Garifuna that you mentioned earlier, they have critical masses of people here in the city, and they are maintaining their culture. They have weekly or bi-weekly meetings where they can get together and talk.
And how can a language like Istro-Romanian, found in Queens, but only a few people speak it, and the chances are that their children are not speaking it, or if they marry people who are American, you know, the chances of perpetuating the language to the next generations are very slim. How do you maintain that language alive?
Well, in that case, there have been efforts by a linguist and others at NYU creating actually a website of Vlaški, the language, where there are learning and teaching materials available. And for a very small dispersed community like that, the internet, which often speeds up language extinction, can actually help to revitalize a language, because there are people all over the world now who are listening to the language through that website. So that's one tool that's being used.
Yes, Miriam?
Yeah, digital literacy is really, and media in general, is very well received by, for example, indigenous people in the Amazon and in the Andes. It looks like if there is a better connection between their oral tradition and this digital literacy, and because they're not going from oral to oral, but to a different kind of medium, it's more appealing than to write, than to basically do writing as we look at it in the classrooms. So it's very, very, very interesting to create websites. We have a lot of websites, Cyber Quechua. There are many things, and people are actually producing literacy.
And it can also help people stay connected to the homeland, because if they're very far away, they can hear the birds, they can see pictures, and they can, through that, revitalize the vocabulary that they might have lost from being far from home.
Yeah. Juliet Blevins and Miriam Cadillo, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When we come back, the debate over Taino identity. Finally from us tonight, another tribe in New York, long considered extinct, the indigenous Taino people of the Greater Antilles, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Santo Domingo, Haiti, and Jamaica have been sighted in, of all places, New York City. And that's not all. New York is the major center for the Confederation of Taino Tribes.
However, their emergence has raised some eyebrows as more people claim Yo soy Taino. Judith Escalona tells us more about who they are and why their claims of an indigenous identity are causing such an uproar.
Yo soy Taino.
Yo soy Taino.
I'm a Taino from Puerto Rico.
Tainos are a growing population of Caribbean and stateside Latinos who are claiming an indigenous identity over any other. The vast majority are from Puerto Rico, where most of the studies about them originate. Taínos were the first Indians to encounter Europeans and the first to bear the brunt of their colonization of the Americas. For centuries, they have been considered extinct, according to Professor Gabriel Haslip Vieira, editor of Taíno Revival.
The pre-Columbian Taínos mixed in with the African and European populations that came into the islands after the Columbus discovery of the Americas. And so by 1600, there's no Taínos. And Neo-Taínos are the people who are claiming that identity 500 years later.
For Robert Mucaro, a Taíno and president of the United Confederation of Taíno People, academics are attempting to discredit the Taíno movement because it overturns the official story.
Columbus arrived in 1492. There was native peoples on the island, and within 50 years, they were all exterminated. I mean, you see that in history books. So the question is not, you know, am I, for example, proclaiming myself to be a pure Taíno?
The roots of the Taíno revival are, ironically, in the Puerto Rican diaspora and U.S. identity politics of the 1970s, when ethnic pride was first articulated. While Taínos have received some public recognition, they have also been accused of embracing an Indian identity in order to deny their African heritage. But Bobby Gonzalez, a Bronx Taíno who teaches American history from an indigenous perspective, disagrees.
Although I acknowledge and am proud of my African and European heritage, what's dominant in me, in blood and spirit, is the Taíno.
Besides reclaiming their history and culture, there are issues of sovereignty, reparation, and land ownership, entitlements that would result from official recognition.
The Neo-Taínos are going to the UN because if they get recognition from the UN, then that can force the US government to give them official recognition, or it can force the Puerto Rican island government to give them recognition. In the case of Puerto Rico, there is clearly resistance.
We don't need a reservation. We're already living on our island. That's where our ancestors are from. But what we need is respect and a seat at the table when it comes to, one, displaying or dealing with our ancestral remains, and two, this educational component in the island that's really been years and years of misinformation.
What makes it even more complicated is the lack of conclusive evidence. Not even DNA testing offers any proof positive about Taíno identity.
In terms of giving us an understanding of what the real genetic makeup of Caribbean Latinos are, the admixture tests are demonstrating what we've known all along, that the people of the Greater Antilles, the people of Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the Dominican Republic are in one way or another mixed populations.
Right there, it's not saying that, you know, we're more of this or more of that. What it's saying is proving that the Taínos were not exterminated. That's the positiveness about the DNA. Because for myself, I didn't need DNA to tell me who I was because I already had that knowledge from my parents.
So while the debate continues, the numbers keep growing of those identifying themselves as Taíno, a people who are, arguably, here to stay. I'm Judith Escalona, Independent Sources.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned.
We hope to see you again next time. Until then, be independent-minded.